Stein and Stevens Show, the show that covers everything from sports to politics to news to entertainment and everything in between. And now your hosts, Troy Geary, Will Stein, and Dave Stevens. Hello, and by that theme song it means another episode of the Geary, Stein, and Stevens Show, and we are excited today. We have a wonderful guest. Let me first bring in my co-host up in Duluth, Minnesota, my buddy Troy. Troy, it is great to see you, my friend. How are things up in Duluth?
We're getting another round of snow today, but other than that, I'm just great.
And I'm excited. It's opening day in baseball. Wherever you're listening to this, if it's dated, hey, we are so excited that another baseball season is here, and we have a wonderful guest today that is joining us. And yes, for our visual folks, the box is black. We had some technical difficulties, but we have an amazing person that's joining us. This guy was he's a legend in my mind. 220 career wins in his lifetime. Pitched for so many organizations, but again, 220 wins isn't too shabby in this day and age. Pedro Martinez has 219 wins, and he's in the Hall of Fame. Joining us vocally instead of visually is Jerry Rice, who played for so many amazing teams, a World Series champion, and also a two-time All-Star. Jerry, thanks for joining us.
Dave, Troy, great to welcome you into, my cell phone.
Yeah. So for the viewers that are watching, we'll make do, but for the listeners, this is going to be a real treat. And Jerry, I know it's been a while since you were in a big league uniform, but you've stayed in baseball as a coach and broadcaster, and we're so glad that we have a little time. So is a day like this, even though you're not in the game, the opening day of the baseball season, it's still got to be special for you.
Absolutely. Because opening day is special in a sense, like the All-Star game, the postseason, and then as you advance in the postseason, each time you reach another level, there's something that is just different uh, from the regular season. The regular season is more of it's not a sprint, it's more of a jog. But when you get into times like the postseason, well, that's really something special where you turn it up. But getting back to opening day, what this means to me is signifies that it's all new. Everybody starts at zero, and the fans come out to celebrate the fact that it's a new, not only that it's a new baseball season, but it's a chance to see the new people on their team and cheer them on and get a forecast of what's due for the upcoming season.
And we're going to take a little bit of look of you on the mound from that youth, that golden hair that was flowing all those years in a Dodger uniform and everything. What are your memories of those of the starts and kind of your place in history?
Well, I started three opening days for three different teams. I opened for the Pirates in 77. I opened for the Pirates in 74, but that was in St. Louis. I opened for the Dodgers in 82 and then again for the White Sox in 89. So I guess I had four opening day starts. And I loved every minute of it because that meant that it was a full season ahead and I could look forward to somewhere around 35 starts during the course of the season. But the unfortunate thing about opening day is because it was so grand and so many people came out to the ballpark, the grass was as green as it was ever going to be, especially in Los Angeles because the temperatures always seem to be perfect for that day game. And it was a day game. So you get to the park early, you see excited people as you drive up. There are fans are already there. And then you make your way up to the parking area into the clubhouse and you see those new uniforms and everything that goes along with it. It really was something special. But as a player, as a pitcher, for me, I was so focused on what I was doing that I truly couldn't enjoy opening day. The festivities were there, the flyover, the flag in the center of the field. It was a sight to behold.
I want to talk to you about your no hitter, July 27th, 1980. Do you remember that day? And what do you remember most about that day? Did you feel like you were on from the beginning? And as the innings go by, what's the mentality that you have to have in order to get through a game like that?
Well, it was like this. I warmed up. It was nothing special, except it was an interesting night in Candlestick Park because the wind that usually accompanies a Friday night game wasn't there. It was a little warmer on the field than what I've experienced. And it was one of those nights where you figured something special might happen because the winds never seemed to be a factor in that ball game. Now, for me, I didn't have strikeout stuff, nor did I care about it because I was just interested in getting outs. A first inning error, no big deal. Errors happen during the ball game, but as each inning progressed, it would loom greater. I got through the first three innings, and of course, at Candlestick Park, if you look over your left shoulder and pretty much in line with third base, you could see this monstrous scoreboard, and it told you everything you needed to know from the number of runs scored against you and the number of hits against you. After three, those were zeros. So you get to the fourth inning, fifth inning, and the sixth inning. And when I got to the sixth inning, I say, there's a chance for something here because I've gone through the lineup twice. And then you get to the seventh inning and the fans get into it. And with each progressive out, the fans would make a bit of a response because by this time we had already put 8 runs on the board, knocked the opposing pitcher Vida Blue out of the box. And then it became a question of not only of me holding the lead, but will I or won't he get the no hitter? So with each out, I did a countdown in my mind. I have 9 to get when I went out in the seventh. And by the time the seventh inning was finished, it was 6 to get. And then you just focus on each out and then break it down even further into each pitch. Now, what's interesting is that normally in a ball game like that, I've already given up a couple of hits, but I had a shutout going. I would try some things with different hitters to see the reaction I'd get. Maybe throw a changeup on a first pitch or a curveball, or do something that I wouldn't do with the score tied. But in this particular game, no hitters at stake, and even a perfect pitch can be a bloop or a little roller in the grass that stops, and you can't, and that the no hitter's over. So for me, it was the only time that I ever pitched for the no hitter, making every pitch as if it were the final pitch of the ball game. So I got through the seventh, and in the eighth, the fans were really into it, and in the ninth, it just set the stage for everything. And it was 3 ground outs, and with that, I had a no hitter. Surprisingly enough, at the end of the no hitter, what do you think the first question was, Troy, from the news people?
Did you
What
want
would
the
you think?
perfect game?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, were you pissed at Russell?
Well, the answer that I gave, and that it was asked to me just so, are you disappointed you didn't get a perfect game? I just pitched a no hitter. How can you be disappointed about anything? Now, as far as Russell's air, he came up to me after the game. He says, "At least you could have walked somebody and take the to take the pressure off me." But it was in the first inning, and interestingly enough, it was against Jack Clark, who hit me pretty well. It was a routine grounder to short, and Clark hustled his way down to first base. And in the process, he might have hurt himself because he came out of the game after his next at bat. And when something like that happens, taking the muscle out of the lineup and the guy who hit you pretty well, that can only favor myself. So with Clark out of the ball game, that was the big interference as far as anything would be concerned with regards to a no hitter. But no, I wasn't disappointed that I got a perfect game. And in fact, it was Leonard Coppett. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Leonard Coppett. He was a great Bay Area sports reporter working for a number of newspapers and so forth. His column the next day was that my no hitter was better than a perfect game. Well, how so? Because I had to get the equivalent of 28 outs instead of 27 that are required for a perfect game. And I thought about it and I said, I'll go with that. So for the last 40, I guess we're going on 43 years now, is that I got 28 outs in a no hitter. And if you want to hear the story, let's sit down and we'll talk about it.
You turn a positive, you spin that negative into a positive, and that I think that was the same for your career. I mean, you were with 8 teams. Here's a look at some of those teams, and people might say, "Oh, he was a journeyman," but again, you had those successes, and it's one of those amazing little known facts. You never won 20 games, yet you won 220 games in your career. And as I said, to me, those are Hall of Fame numbers. In this era, if you were to win 190, they're putting you in Cooperstown already. So, I mean, what are your thoughts as far as the longevity of your career and those opportunities that you had in Houston and Pittsburgh and all those places along the way?
Well, a 22-year career doesn't guarantee that you're Hall of Fame material. A perfect example is the 26-year career of Tommy John, and he's not there. He should be. And I'll get off the soapbox after that. But in looking at my career, just the numbers and how they plug into my contemporaries, 3 times I won 18 games, won 6 teams a couple of times. Those are good numbers, and I'm proud of them. But they're just, in my opinion, not Hall of Fame numbers as I sit here today. Now, that may change in the future. I don't know how the dynamics will change over time. But as far as I'm concerned, it was a good career. It was 22 years with a lot of good times, a lot of bad times. And I was able to survive a whole lot longer than I really thought I would. From the time I was 20 until I was 41 years old, that's a long time to be pitching. And I pitched in my hometown and I walked off the field the last time in Pittsburgh to a standing ovation. So, and all of those good times and bad times in between, you measure them out. And when I think about it in whole, it gives me a nice little warm fuzzy that it was a pretty good ride and I'm glad I had it. And at 73 years old, the whole part about even thinking about being in the Hall of Fame, now it doesn't really matter to me because it's not going to change in my mind what it was like to go through 22 different seasons of Major League Baseball.
Well, we are talking with I think a legendary Jerry Rice. So many amazing teams. We'll get back to talking baseball in a minute. It's ironic you talked about Tommy John because he was on our show last week and we addressed that. And it's one of those things where he said Jim Cott is now trying to help him get into the Hall of Fame. And if he doesn't get in our lifetime, I mean, there is really something wrong with the process in baseball. So thank you for even bringing that up because just he's just was a wonderful guy with a great career and changed the way that we look at the medical world now with Tommy John surgery. And so, thank you for bringing that up, Jerry. It was
Yeah, for no other reason, the surgery. But if you take a look at his career, he pitched in World Series, All Star games, 26-year career. But the big thing though is that he came back from that surgery, a surgery that he was the first to get. And by doing so, he allowed a number of other pitchers to continue a career and go on to bigger and better things, not only in professional ball, but sometimes in college, even in high school. There have been kids who've had the surgery and they're still out there playing. I think you have to think a bit out of the box as far as numbers and values and say, what did he contribute to the game overall? And when you factor in the surgery that's named after him, it's a no-brainer.
absolutely. And it's also a no-brainer if you're watching our show visually. We're sorry Jerry's camera couldn't be in, but if you're looking at me, that means you're checking out this amazing shirt that I'm wearing. Of course, it feels good and feels good and sharply and freshthreads.com. Type in the GSS show code, which is our code for our show. You get 20% off. They've got Henleys, they've got polos, they've got all kinds of stuff, bomber jackets. Troy and I look really super sharp at the Super Bowl. So go to freshcleanthreads.com, type in that show code, and get 20% off. And let's head back to our second half of our show. Troy, you got another couple of questions for Jerry.
Yeah, you had a lot of great managers during your career, Danny Murtaugh, Tommy Lasorda, Chuck Tanner, Jim Leland. You got a quick story about each one? And with Tommy, he was portrayed in the media to be this different guy. How was he like behind the scenes?
Boy, that's a big question to answer. Uh, I don't even know if you have enough time in the program to go through a bio of each manager I played for. The first was Red Schoendienst. Let's see, you want me to name them all? Let's see if I can do it. Red Schoendienst, Harry Walker, Leo DeRocher, Danny Murtaugh, Chuck Tanner, Tom Lasorda, Pete Rose. How about that one? I bet you didn't know that.
No.
Gene Mock and Jim Fragosi, Jeff Torborg. Uh, oh gosh, in Milwaukee, I can't think of his name. Tom, um, well, and then Jim Leland. So
That's
you get
that's some
there's
baseball
15 of them.
history there.
Yeah,
Well,
there's
tell
some.
us about Lasorda. Give me some stuff on Lasorda because what you know, just a character that was so beloved and lived such an amazing life. But I mean, Tommy is Tommy, and luckily we're not going to have Tommy having those words that he says when he was usually on camera. But I mean, what a legend, and just to be a part of him, and for you to be a part of that team, it must have been amazing.
Well, it worked out well for both of us because when I joined the ball club. It was after the guy we talked about, Tommy John, leaving to sign a free agent contract with the Yankees. So I was a lefty, and I joined the club in Houston. And before I even got in uniform, I stopped into his office and said hello. And he says, "Sit down. I want you to sit down." Now I see all this enthusiasm. You don't see this from a major league manager. At least I never did in the 10 previous years that I played. So Tommy's sitting there, and he said, and he's sitting there, he's in his underwear. He says, I love the Dodgers. He said, "You want to know how much I love the Dodgers?" I said, "Well, I'm sitting here. Yeah, why don't you tell me?" He says, "I love the Dodgers so much that even after I go to the big Dodger in the sky, I want to work for the Dodgers." So when they put up my gravestone, I want them to put a Dodger schedule there. He says, "You want to know why?" And I said, "Why is that?" He says, "When people come to see their loved ones, they can always stop by my gravestone and they can see whether the Dodgers are home or away." So that was my introduction to Tom Lasorda.
And I know you guys. I mean, he could come at you, but there's some amazing. Like I found some this photo, and I don't know if you can see it of you guys sharing a hot tub together. I mean, what's the story with you guys in this hot tub?
It was in spring training. I'm guessing 1984. I can't really remember because I was the one who posted that picture on the internet, and I did it on my Flickr site where I posted the best of my baseball pictures. And we were in spring training. It was one of those late in spring training kind of days where it's hot, it's humid, and Lasorda liked to throw batting practice after the regular workout was over. He got some of the young players out there and actually taunted them. Well, this day he was a little overmatched by the heat. And then when other coaches saw that he was having trouble between pitches, they called for a golf cart to come over and pick him up because he couldn't walk him back to the clubhouse. So he rode on the golf cart, and I happened to be in the training room at the time because that doubled as our gym. It was very rudimentary back then. And it was the trainer, Bill Bueller, who decided that Tom needed to take a bath in cool water, and the only place to do that was in the whirlpool. So Bill Bueller got the whirlpool ready, put some ice in there and some water, and then Lasorda comes in. He's bitching and moaning and complaining. "I'll never get in a whirlpool. I've never gotten a whirlpool before. In fact, I don't plan to get in one right now." So that was it. But Bueller eventually got his clothes off, put him in the whirlpool, and suddenly Tommy gets the color back in his face, and all of a sudden, he's singing the praises of how much he loves the whirlpool to everybody who came in to check on him. "Tommy, how you doing?" Say, "Hey, I'm doing great, but I got to tell you, this whirlpool is the greatest thing ever. I can understand now why guys want to come into the training room and sit in the whirlpool. I just love this thing." I'm still in the training room with other players doing my work, and I'm hearing all this. And every time somebody new came in, and this was after about 8 or 10 times, somebody checking on him, Lasorda giving him the same story. And guys who were working out with me looked at me and they said, "You think we're going to have to listen to this every time?" And I said, "No, I'll take care of that right now." So I guess Tommy was oblivious to the fact that I had been in the room the whole 15 minutes he was in the whirlpool. So I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Skip, how you doing?" He says, "Man, I can't tell you how great this whirlpool is." And he repeated the whole thing over to me again. I said, "Really?" I said, "Isn't that good?" He says, "It is unbelievably good." Well, here, let me join you. So I climbed in the whirlpool with him. He objected. He cussed me out left and right. And finally, he just submitted because he knew there was no way that I was going to get out of there. And what it did, it finally stopped him from saying everything about how great it was. And suddenly, other people started to come in to see how he's doing. They took one look at the two of us in the whirlpool, and they said, I think I'll come back later. And out they go. But it put an end to what he said about how great the whirlpool was. And that was the legend behind that picture.
As long as your bats and balls didn't touch, I guess we're okay, huh?
Yeah, but you did know where my I did have control of my big toe, and with that, we did have some laughs.
I was going to ask you about that infield that you had with the Dodgers. Steve Garvey, Ron Say, Bill Russell, Davey Lopes. I mean, just talk about how much fun that was. Just you can be able to just pitch knowing those guys had your back.
Well, they were there for a long time, and I guess that's really the claim to fame. 8.5 years being on the roster together. And I think someone from the Dodgers looked it up and they said, if these guys stick around for such and such time, they'll set the record for being together the most years. And that became a thing. And the Dodgers rallied around that, putting their pictures on magazines, in the newspapers, and in just about anything in an effort to promote the players. And it was four pretty good guys who went along with this promotion. Now, individually, Say was more of an offensive threat than he was a defensive threat. He could catch anything that came to him, but his problem was throwing it over to first base. He short armed it over to first, and as a result, a lot of his throws were in the dirt. And fortunately, Garvey was over there who could probably pull him out of the dirt as well as anybody in the league at the time. Now, Garv couldn't throw either, but as a first baseman, there weren't many occasions where we had to worry about that. So it brings us to the two guys in the middle infield, both who were signed as outfielders. Both were center fielders. And the Dodgers' needs were to have infielders, and they figured that both Russell and Lopes were good enough athletes that they could learn a new position and insert themselves in a lineup because offensively, they fit perfectly into the offensive support that pitchers and the team got whenever they went out there. Lopes, a base stealing threat, he was stealing better than 80% for his entire career. He'd lead off, get on, get himself in the scoring position for the middle part of that lineup, which included Garvey, Say, you could put Rick Monday in there and Reggie Smith. All of them had a chance to put the Dodgers ahead early in a ball game. Russell, you could bat him anywhere in the lineup except for the power spots. You could bat him second because he could go deep into the count, and you could bat him in front of the pitcher if you wanted, depending on how you wanted to stack up against the opposition. So offensively, it was a pretty good combination to have on an infield. Defensively, each of them had a bit of their shortcomings, but they played so well together that each could compensate for the deficiencies in the man they were playing next to. So as a result, you got an average to slightly above average defensive infield, but well above average offensively and produced runs. So whatever you lost defensively, you more than gained offensively. So that's where the power structure was. That's where the offensive setup was for the daily lineup. So when you put it all together, it was that group who played in the infield that got the Dodgers to the World Series in 74, 77, 78, and again in 1981. So I guess when you weigh it all out, it was instrumental in getting to the big dance four different times in the span of just 8 years.
Jerry, before Troy's gonna has a question about the rule changes, but I just wanted to ask you, as we've watched baseball change, immensely in the last few years. You were expected to pitch 7 or 8 innings in those days, and I know it took its wear and tear on a lot of those pitchers. But what would Jerry Rice tell the Jerry Rice, a 21, 22-year-old today, how that approach to the game would be different mentally?
Well, I guess pretty much like the pitchers have already determined themselves. When I first joined Pittsburgh, Danny Murtaugh called me in the office and he said, "You give me 6 innings and leave with a lead, you're going to win a lot of ball games for me." And I said, "Danny, 6 innings is just getting started. I want to complete every game that I start." He smiled and he says, "I appreciate that attitude, but I've got a bullpen and I've got it set up to where I can take care of those final 3 innings." It was the first time I ever heard a manager think in terms of 3 inning increments as far as his pitching was concerned. So that introduced me to it. And there were times when I did pitch more than 6 innings, many times. But it was the approach and the attitude growing up that 9 innings was a complete game and let's go out there and do it. Now, by the time I got to the big leagues, there were guys who were already throwing better than 20 complete games in a season. And on occasion, though I can't remember who, I could guess, there were some guys who would throw 30. Ferguson Jenkins is one that comes to mind. And once the designated hitter became the norm in the American League, there were probably a handful of others every year that teams. So as time went on and bullpens were considered more important, well, managers liked their setups better once the 6 innings were completed. From the seventh on, they mixed and matched until they bridged to a closer. And that's when the closer took over and shut things down. But it was not an easy transition, and it took some years for a while. I remember Rich Gossage sometimes going 2 and 3 innings to collect the save. So he wasn't just a ninth inning guy. But by the time we got to the late 80s and 90s, it became customary, especially around Bruce Sutter and Lee Smith with the Cubs, that they came in just to close the game out in the ninth inning. And that's where that became the custom, and that's where it stands today, at least for most teams. But having the guys in between to eat up those innings, a couple of pitches at a time, maybe no more than 15, so they can repeat the next night. It's become a game of chess for managers against the opposition.
You do broadcasting for the Las Vegas Aviators. That's the Oakland A's AAA team. What do you think of the recent changes, pitch clocks, bigger bases? And also, you were a pretty decent hitter back in the day. I mean, what are your thoughts on the universal DH?
Well, first of all, I don't work for the Aviators anymore. They went younger, so we'll leave that at that. And as far as the rule changes, you know, the game always has to change. And as a player, I remember an older player coming to me and said, "You have a responsibility here rather than other than just collecting a paycheck and looking good in a uniform." He said, "It's your job for the time that you're here is to make the game better for the next generation that comes on, because that's how we've been able to improve things." And if you look at the improvements that occurred during my 22 years, we saw multi-purpose stadiums, we saw artificial turf, we saw double knit uniforms, the advent of the closer in the game, we saw salaries rise, we saw free agency. I could kind of just go on, but that's right off the top. And of course, there were rule changes back then that tried to take care of some of the problems that the game was experiencing. And that's where we are right now with the rule changes that the commissioner implemented. But he gave it a good look in the minor leagues, listened to the people who saw it, talked to the scouts, talked to the fans, talked to the general managers, and said, as a consensus, let's see what we can do here. And these are the rules that they came up with. Now, this is the first year that they're trying them. How it'll work out, I really don't know. But I understand what it is they're trying to do. They're trying to please a fan base and keep the game as current as they possibly can. Used to be, maybe it still is, that a father would bring his son or a grandfather would bring his grandson to a ball game and they'd enjoy it together. But they saw a different kind of ball game than what they would have seen, well, if they played last year. It was a long, drawn out game, and kids get a little antsy, particularly in this day and age when they're used to more of an instant gratification. So, anything that baseball can do to address what they consider a problem, I consider a positive. Now, whether it'll actually work out as it did in the minor leagues, I guess we'll see. But so far, after spring training and using the clocks, we see that the game has been cut down by right around a half hour to about 2.5 hours a game. And if that's their goal, they've succeeded. But it's taken dead time out of it. There's still 9 innings to play. So what it's done is that it's kept people engaged both on television and in person. And I think that's only going to be a positive over time. Of course, there'll be some tweaking, there always is. And as a result, the game will be better because of it. But again, it's one of those wait and see things. Keep your fingers crossed and hope that the game is better now because of these rule changes than what they've been in the preceding years.
Jerry, I just want to touch on Troy's question because you could hit. You had 171 career knocks, but I got to ask you that lone home run. Do you remember who it was off of, and can you take us back to that moment?
Yeah, when you only hit one, you don't forget it. It was in Philadelphia in 1980, and it was off Nino Espinosa, and I hit it down the left field line, which is rare for a left-handed batter. And surprising enough to me, it just carried, hit the top of the fence, and bounced into the netting that was the foul pole in Philadelphia. So in the bullpen, they were able to grab the ball and give it to me after the game. Yeah, that was it. I do remember it. Like I said, it was strange to run around the bases myself. I didn't have a home run trot, but I touched them all and went in and sat down. And I said, "Now, isn't that something?" So,
You weren't in
yeah.
a pitcher's pool with those guys, Fernando and any of those guys?
What about them?
I said you weren't in a home run pool with the pitchers on your team?
No, no. That was, to me, that wasn't a concern. Fernando wasn't there at that time. He didn't come until a little later in 1980, so he missed it.
Mm.
No, we just didn't talk about that. That wasn't a topic of conversation because let's see, Sutton was there. He was a non-hitter, and actually the best hitting pitcher. I played for two of the best hitting pitchers in the game, and one was Ken Brett, the other was Terry Forster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
Forster has an over 400 average. Who would have guessed that?
Well,
Unbelievable. Well, before we let you go again, we've been talking about baseball history. You got any good? We just lost him, but you got any good Vin Scully stories from your time there? Did take stuff away from him as a broadcaster? Have any interactions much with him?
I once said that if Vin read the Los Angeles phone book, he could draw a 7 share on the AM radio. Yeah, he was that good. People just loved to listen to him. Now, the history behind Vin, when I broadcast for the Dodgers in the mid 2000s, I would meet at Dodger Stadium the night before the team would take off for a road trip. Vin didn't do road trips, so they shuffled the broadcast group, and I was put on radio with Rick Monday. So I'd have a chance to visit with Vin at dinner before, along with the other broadcasters. And Vin would talk, and I asked him once about the advent of the.
Oh no, we have just lost our guest right at that last moment, right as he was about to talk about Vin Scully. I guess we can leave it there. I'm not sure, Troy. Should we let him try to pop in so we can at least say
yeah,
goodbye?
we'll see if he'll pop back in real quick.
La, 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 la.
But
All right, so that's live
interesting
TV
story.
and live podcast and all that kind of stuff. And again, we apologize for Jerry not having his picture, but it's been a great show. And just to pick his brain again, some of the great names he's mentioned as far as Lasorda and all those people. And I think we've got him back in. So yep, Jerry is back. I don't know why we lost you, but you're right in the middle of talking about Vin. So go for it, my friend.
Let me start at the beginning.
Yeah.
Is that at dinner one night with Vin in the Dodgers dining room before I went on a road trip doing the broadcasting for the club, Vin explained to me about how the transistor radio was important to Dodger broadcast and how it advanced his career. When the Dodgers went to the Coliseum, uh, the people couldn't see because they sat so far away from the action. And a crack of the bat, they wouldn't hear until a second or two after it actually occurred. So they were able to pick up the game on the transistor radio. And that allowed Vince to take them all the way through the ball game, Dodger history, and fans got into the habit of every time they came to the ball game to listen to the Dodgers at the same time they were watching them. And so that's how Vin built an audience of kids who grew up to be fathers and grandparents, and they would enjoy his voice at the ball game, and they would go to the game, even though at Dodger Stadium you could see everything because there were always good sight lines, and but they still brought the transistor radio because it became a habit. So, in fact, it was so much of a habit that once when I was pitching for Houston, they didn't draw back in the early 70s like they did in the 80s. They drew 20,000 or so a night. So there was always empty seats, but if there was 20,000 people there, there were 10,000 radios. And you could hear these radios when you stood in the mound. In fact, that might have been the best audio experience you could ever have. I'm pitching in a ball game and getting ready to throw a pitch. However, Vin was in the middle of a story. And I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could tell from his cadence he was telling the story. And I was ready to pitch, but he hadn't got to the punchline. So, as a courtesy to the best in the business, I stepped off the mound, grabbed the rosin bag, let him finish his story. He got his laughter, and without missing a beat, he said, "And here's Royce ready with the 2-2."
Wow, that is just tremendous. Wow, what a great career you've had, and just to be able to just to talk about the people, the who's who, the Reggie Jacksons, the people you've faced, all those kind of things, your World Series moments. I mean, it's been great. I was a kid in Arizona, and I listened because we didn't have a team in those days, and you either listened to the Angels or the Dodgers because that's you could get on an AM radio station that would come out of California, and just to listen to when you pitched and Bert Hooton and all those guys, it was just Manny Mota and all those guys that you got to play with. Just awesome for you to take a little bit of time
Yeah,
for
isn't
us.
it something that the AM radio and television, particularly cable TV now, unless they all go bankrupt, is that it's able to bring baseball right to your television, no matter where you live. And once they get rid of these blackout rules, you'll be able to choose whatever team you want to watch and follow them from the start of the season to the very end. Now,
Yeah,
to me, that's the golden age of baseball, when you can follow your team from anywhere in this country. And who knows, if you go on a vacation and you want to know like how your Dodgers are doing, if you're a Dodger fan, you could say, well, let's see, we probably get them about 3 in the morning. Let's take a look and see what they do. And you can watch the game live before you do your vacation. That
yeah.
to
We
me,
we need to
that
get
to me,
rid of that blackout rule. Is so stupid when we're trying to watch. I get that with the Twins games. I'm trying to watch. Troy gets it with the Twins and the Royals. Like if we've paid for the package, then give us everything that we want to see of our teams, right?
oh, the commissioner hears you loud and clear, but there's nothing he can do because each of these contracts are drawn up individually. Back in the day, each team could declare a territory. And in some cases, because the proximity geographically were close, teams could share the same local geographic area. For instance, here in Las Vegas, we get blackouts of 6 different teams. Same thing in Des Moines, Iowa. They have 6 different teams from which they're declared as an area, and they get blacked out left and right. So it's really hard to follow your favorite team. But one thing that could come from these bankruptcies, the regional sports network, is that they can redefine the rules. And if they do it, they'll take care of these blackouts and the commissioner said this, he would like to see a day when someone who wants to follow a team can do so if they buy the package. They can see every game of the season, including some of those that are on networks. And if there's ever a good thing to come out of, or if there's ever a silver lining to come out of that dark cloud, this would be it. So I'm not cheering for bankruptcies, but you understand where I'm coming from.
I do. And last good news for today, minor league baseball, they've most of the time doubled or even tripled the salaries for these kids. I mean, you were riding a bus probably at $200 or $100 a week back in the day, correct?
No, I didn't do it per week. I never thought of it per week. It was when I signed my first contract, it was 500 a month. And I was surprised to learn until Major League Baseball got called out on this a few years ago. They were still paying some guys 500 a month. How can you make a living doing it that way? I just can't imagine. And then when I coached in the early 2000s, I was surprised that they were asking guys to work in the off season, but they didn't pay them. I said, how can you do this? You're asking them to go weight work, you're asking them to run, you prescribe all these different things for them, but you don't pay them. How can you do that? But it's getting addressed now. I guess it's better now than it's ever been. So if anybody tells you that the golden age of baseball was back in the 50s and 60s or the 70s and 80s, no. Golden age of baseball is today.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, thank you for joining us so much. And for our listeners and viewers out there, don't forget you can also catch these episodes on your home TV. And we'll have Jerry up in a day or two to watch it. And you can watch it from the confines of your own home and see all of the shows that we've had, past ones. Tommy John last week, Donnie Most from Happy Days was just on. So we are so excited. And again, for you guys that support us and follow us on all of our social media platforms, go to yourhometv.com. There's my old buddy Jason working out. I'll see him in a couple weeks when I head down to Florida. So again, Jerry, thank you so much for your time. Troy, what another great show, huh?
Yeah, Jerry, I was once again thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us, talking baseball. And yeah, like I said, today is the best time of the year for that opening day. So thanks a lot.
Well, enjoy your opening days, Dave. Troy, enjoyed talking to you. And next time we visit, we'll have video to go with it.
Video or in person, so we'll try to make it happen that way. So again, thank you, Jerry, for joining us. This is the Gary Stein and Stevens Show. Continue to follow us on all social media platforms. We sound good, we look good. That's all because you guys are following us. So have an amazing day, weekend, wherever you are. Opening day for a couple of weeks, home openers, whatever. Just enjoy baseball. Go out, throw the ball around, watch it on TV with your kids. Just enjoy what baseball is all about. For Troy, Dave, Jerry, and wherever the heck Will Stein is, I'm Dave Stevens. We'll see you next time. Peace out and have a great weekend.